everyone. Welcome to another Power BI user group session, Persian Power BI user group. My name is Vahid. I'm the organizer of this user group, and today we have Chandip here. Hey, Chandip. Welcome to our
Hey,
user group, and thanks for accepting my invitation, mate. I'm super excited to have you here.
thank you so much for having sent over the invite to me. I'm super
Yeah,
glad I could make it. We've been planning
yeah.
it this for maybe for a year now.
Yeah, for a
And
year. Yeah, it's really hard to find you or find a time in your busy calendar, mate. But I'm
uh,
glad
I'm glad
finally,
you made it.
finally we are here. Yeah. So
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
for those people who doesn't know Chandip, if you are a Excel user, Power BI user, Power Query user, and you search anything related to these three topics on Google, 100% you find a video, blog, or something from Chandip. Chandip is one of the famous people and expert in this area, especially Power Query. And today we have a great session talking about. He will show us how to use one of the most useful and complicated formula in the Power Query. Before I hand over to you, mate, I just want to show two slides here. First, I
Sure.
want to show about the next session we have here on 22nd. We will have another session again about Power Query with Week Recruit. So I will share more information about that one on my LinkedIn, and I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me Vegas Image on the LinkedIn and find out when and what link you can use to attend that one. The other things is the series of the free online learning series we have with Omid, and that's again about Power Query. We had first session 2 weeks ago. Actually, we had a plan to hold the next session this week, but I got the flu actually and I couldn't make it, so we shifted to the next week. So 11th of June will be the second session about the tips for merging and grouping. Okay, that's only two slides from me. So over to you, mate. If you let me share your screen here and get rid of this
Sure.
banner and okay, go ahead, mate.
Sure. Thank you. So I obviously would like to speak about List.Accumulate, but I want to know first from the audience that how many of you are yet not working with the M language? Because what I'm going to show you today is going to be a lot of use of the M language in Power Query. But just let me know in the chat, in the comments. I'm looking at the chat as we speak. Are you using the M language or not? So I'd be interested to know. You can run the chat on the screen. I can
Yeah,
take a look at it.
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
not a problem.
Feel free to add your comments there, and I can pin it something like this one to the screen. So
Yeah.
let me
Okay.
know. So we have
Okay.
received few here. Yeah.
Hey,
Yes.
Nair.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. 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 Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
So
Many
I
yes.
believe that. Yeah. Okay. That's a good thing to actually know, because what we're going to do today is enhance the capabilities of the user interface and learn this function list.accumulate. How many of you have in the past tried to use list.accumulate, but you don't really understand how this function is working? Also, let me know about that. Your current understanding, or maybe you can start with how many of you don't have any idea about a function called list.accumulate, because none of the clicks of Power Query gives you list.accumulate. I mean, everything is every other function, but you don't get list.accumulate using user interface of Power Query. So how many of you know of this function? How many of you have tried using this function? Let me know about that experience as well in the chat. I have not used list.accumulate, not used it yet. Okay. One of my preferred functions. Okay. Okay, I don't know how to use it. Okay, fine. Fine. Never heard of it until I saw the ad from this webinar. Okay, I have used it. Okay, fine. Fine. All right. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. All right, let's just see how can we put list.accumulate to use in this session. So I am going to talk about list.accumulate. List.accumulate function works like a ledger. Like, I'm sure anybody who's from the accounting background would appreciate how the accounts are made. So you have a closing balance, the closing balance becomes the opening balance the next time, and then you do something, you get a closing balance again, the closing balance becomes the opening balance the next time, so on and so forth. So if you are an accounting person, the list.accumulate concept is really going to jive with you, especially because you have the property in that function that this function can accumulate items from the previous iteration to the new iteration. All of the words that I'm saying might just sound like a big jargon to you. So I'm just going to try to simplify as much as possible, try to speak English in the simplest way possible, use simple words, not really any complicated jargons out here. So with that being said, let's just start. I am working with this data. We have 6 days and we have stock in or out. So on the first day, we have +5, the next day -3, then +8, then -3, and then +1, and then minus so on and so forth. Now, I would like to know that what is the closing stock. So let's just say that my opening stock is 0. I start with 0. So I'm going to write a formula something like this. This plus this. Simple as that. And I drag this formula down and I get that the closing stock is actually 4. So whatever is the opening balance, I add or subtract whatever the current usage of the stock is today. So today is +5, so I add that. The next time it's -3, so 5 minus 3 gives me 2, so on and so forth, and the kind of stock goes on. Now, this example could also be just solved by using just like this summation. You could just literally like sum the entire range of this entire range. But we're trying to draw parallels of list.accumulate functions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do things a bit differently this time. Now, this closing stock, which is the closing stock, which is 4 at the end, is exactly what list.accumulate can help you understand. So let me just actually go ahead and start writing list.accumulate in Power Query on this data. And list.accumulate function is going to let me know what my closing stock is. Once we write list.accumulate, we will then come back and solve this particular problem. And we will kind of take a look at what the formula is asking and how do you work with list.accumulate. So I'm going to take this data into Power Query. So this data I selected and I just put that into Power Query. And there is my Power Query window right here. So let me just increase the size of this. All right, cool. All right. Now for list.accumulate function to work, you obviously have to work with a list. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe convert this column. This is a table at the moment. I'm going to convert this column into a list. And one of the ways of doing that is right-clicking on the column and using the drill down option, and that converts a column into a list. Once you do that, this actually becomes a list. Now, on this particular list, I want to write list.accumulate, and my end objective is to get the final closing stock value, which is nothing but 4. We saw it in Excel. So I will start to write list.accumulate. I'll say list.accumulate. And as I write the function, I will also explain to you what this formula is doing, what the formula is asking, and things like that. So list.accumulate function, if you take a look, it's asking you, hey, what list do you want to work with? And the list that I want to work with was the stock list, which is where we had a couple of plus numbers, a couple of minus numbers, so on and so forth. So that's the list that I have imported right here, which is nothing but the previous step, which is column 1. That is nothing but my navigation. That's my list. Then if you take a look, list.accumulate moves on to the second input and asks you, hey, what's your starting position? So when you're trying to accumulate through items, you have to tell list.accumulate how would you like to start accumulating the items? What's your starting position? So my starting position happens to be 0, which is also something that we took a look at in Excel. Our starting number in Excel was 0, which was the closing stock of the previous day. This is what we assumed. So I'm going to say that my starting position is 0. Then you say that what is your accumulator as a function? So whenever you're declaring an accumulator, it simply means that here is my list. When I am trying to accumulate the values of the list, What behavior do I want? That's the meaning of accumulator as a function. What should I do for every single accumulation that happens? Now, there is a very special way to declare the accumulators and the function. The way to declare the accumulator function is by declaring two mandatory variables. The first variable is s, and you can call it anything. You can call it j, p, t, any letter or anything. And the second variable is c. Now, the reason why I call it as s and c is because in the official documentation of Power Query, the first variable, which I have called it s, the full name of that is called state. And the second variable, which I have called as c, that is called current in the official documentation of Power Query. But you're free to use any names for those. Just that the first one always becomes the state and the second one always becomes current. Now, at the moment, I might have started to sound, speaking jargons, but just hang in with me for just a little bit. So I declare two variables, which are mandatory variables, s and c. And then I specify my rocket sign. I call it the rocket sign or the go-to symbol. Now, everything ahead of this rocket sign is going to be nothing but my function, right? Now, I have to specify that what is the behavior that I need. Now, I'm going to maybe come out of my Power Query, leave the function in error for the moment, and see that what can I do with this particular function. So I'll say close and load to, only make a connection, click on OK, and that's my errored out query. Now, when I was doing the behavior of the function, what is the behavior that I want? So I would want this particular value to be added to the previous value. That's what I want. So I'm going to go back to my query, and I'm going to write something like, why don't you do something like s plus c? S plus c. And at the moment, you don't understand what is s and what is c, and I do understand that. But the answer that we get is nothing but 4. And this is exactly the answer that we got it back in Excel as well. This is the answer 4 that you match up right here. Now, let's just take this formula and let's just start to understand what this formula is doing and what the heck is S, C, and all of that. So I'm going to copy this formula and I'm going to come out of Power Query. Let's just keep it. And let's just go ahead and start. Actually, I'm just going to maybe start to create a text box in Excel. And in the text box, I will dump my formula. All right, that's nice. And I'll put that right here. All right, let's just go. So if you now take a look at list.accumulate function, the list.accumulate, the first part is what's the list that you're trying to work with. So if column 1 is nothing but this particular list, this list is nothing but column 1. So I can just call this as my list. So this is the list that I'm trying to work with. Remember, the first part of list.accumulate is this particular list. Then list.accumulate, second part says that, okay, when you're trying to accumulate values, what should be your starting point? So I'm saying my starting point of accumulation is nothing but 0. So that becomes my starting point. And then, like I said, this part, the third part of list.accumulate is an accumulator function. And the way that you write the function is that you have to declare two mandatory variables, which is s and c. Now, let me help you understand the meaning of s and c. S, like I said, denotes the word state. What does the state means? State simply means that what is the result of the previous accumulation? That is the meaning of state. So let's just write some accumulation. So I'm just going to maybe open up a few hidden columns that I have it here, and you will understand better. So let's just say that I'm trying to accumulate. When I'm saying accumulate, I'm just trying to find the closing stock. And the way that I find closing stock is by taking the previous closing stock and taking a look at what happened the current day and then moving on to the next day. So that's my accumulation happening. So if you take a look at the S here, when the iteration is going on, iteration meaning when the row by row calculation is going on, in the first time, the S takes the value of the previous step, which is nothing but my opening. So that is my opening. My opening value was 0. So S becomes 0 for the first time. So S is nothing but the result of the previous iteration. I repeat myself, S is nothing but the result of the previous iteration. So the result of the previous iteration, we are currently on the first. This is my list, and we are currently on the first iteration. So S is right now going through the first iteration. So the previous iteration is going to be nothing but your starting point, and that is nothing but your S. All right. And then you have declared the variable called C. C simply means that what is the value, current value in the list. So if we have 5 iterations to go through, so this is iteration number 1, iteration number 2, 3, iteration number 4, 5, and iteration number 6. When the iteration is here, the value of C is going to be 5. When the iteration reaches the second stage, the value of C is going to change and it's going to become 3, so on and so forth. So if you take a look at C here, the C is nothing but whatever value is there in the current iteration. That's the meaning of C. So whatever list that you have chosen, the elements of that list form the value of C in every single iteration. That's the meaning of C. Now, as a function, what I'm saying is that please take the S, which is the value of the previous iteration, and add the current value in the list. That's what I'm saying. So what I'm trying to do here as an accumulator function is I'm trying to say S plus C, and S plus C is nothing but the value of the previous iteration, which is this, plus C, which is nothing but 5. And that's what I'm trying to do. If I do that, if I press enter, the answer is still going to be the same value, which is nothing but 4. That is the value that you get. That is the basic premise of List.Accumulate. So List.Accumulate, I'll just say it again, uses these two. The hardest part in List.Accumulate to understand is what the heck is S and C, or state and current. So S, remember, S is the value of the result of the previous iteration. So when it goes to the second iteration, the value is going to become this. When it goes to the third iteration, the value is going to become this, so on and so forth. So whatever result is there in the previous iteration, that becomes S, and C is nothing but the value in the current value in the list. That is my C. All right, with that said, I hope everybody understands at least prima facie as to what List.Accumulate function does, what are the different parts of List.Accumulate. But right now we have picked up a terrible example to work with List.Accumulate. So you're going to be asking a question, okay, fine, but I don't think that I'm going to ever use this. This is not practical. This is like a stupid example. Well, let's just make this example slightly more relevant. So what I'm going to do is, in the second example, we have been able to get to this number, which is 4. We have been talking about this number over and over again. But as of now, the 4 that we get is the final output. We do not get to see that how the values were accumulated. That means I want to take a look at 0, then I want to take a look at 5, then I want to take a look at 2, 10, 7, 8, and 4. I want to take a look at the entire list as to how the values were accumulated. So I do not want to have one answer, which is 4. This particular formula that we wrote in Power Query gave us one answer, 4, but I do not want to have that. I instead want to have multiple answers, which is this particular list. That's the answer that I want, and that's where we are headed. So the next thing that I want to talk about in List.Accumulate is that List.Accumulate, although is a list function, but the crazy aspect about List.Accumulate is that List.Accumulate can result in anything other than a list as well. So with List.Accumulate, you can have a number as an output, just as the way that we saw it. With List.Accumulate, you can have a text as an output, a list as an output, a table as an output, and things like that. So the output, if you just go back and take a look at the query once again, I think that will help you understand. So if you take a look at the query right now, if you just go through the formula bar, in the formula bar, you're going to see that List.Accumulate, which is my formula right now, spits out a number. But I don't want to spit out a number anymore. I want to spit out a list right here. And this can change. So you can spit out a list, you can spit out a table, or anything like that. So the output of the List.Accumulate function can be literally anything. That's the crazy part. And that's what makes the formula very, very workable with practical applications of the data. Now, coming back to our example. So I'm still working with this particular list, these numbers, the stock in or out example, but I do not want to have the final answer as 4. What I'd like to have is that I want to see every step of accumulation. So once you start with 0, so 0 happens to be my answer, one of the answers, then 0 plus 5, then I will have 5 as an answer, then 5 minus 3, I'll have 2 as an answer, so on and so forth, till the time I get to the value 4. So I want to see how the values were accumulated from the first value till the last value, and I want to see all of the steps and how the S was coming out in all of the steps. Let's just work. So I'm going to go back to sheet number 2. Now, before we start to do it, we have to understand a couple of things about List.Accumulate, like slightly more tricky topics. So what I'm going to do is, in my Excel right here, I'm going to start to write a formula, and let me see if that formula works or not. So I'll say List.Accumulate, and I will say, hey, I'm trying to work with a list, and this list is nothing but this particular list right here. And then my starting point is 0. This is what I wrote it in the last example. And then I declare two variables, s and c, and the function, this creates a function, and the function is nothing but, hey, take the s and plus c. Now I have to make modifications to this formula so that my output is not a single number, but the entire list, and each stages of accumulation is being accumulated, and I get multiple answers in the list. So how do we make this work? Now, there are a couple of things that come to my mind. The first thing that comes to my mind is something like this. If I want the list as an output, then I also have to start with a list. That means that if I'm not looking at 4 as an answer, if I'm looking forward to a list as an answer, which is I'll have the first value 0, then the second value is 5, the third value as 2, so on and so forth. If I'm looking at multiple answers, this is nothing but a list. If I want a list as an answer of List.Accumulate, then my starting point should not be a single number, but it should be a list. So what I do is, the first thing that I do, the first thing that you also have to understand about List.Accumulate is that whatever you start with, which is this was the seed or the starting point, whatever you start with in List.Accumulate also happens to be the output that you get in List.Accumulate. Since we started off with a number, we got a number output. This time, I do not want to start with a number. I want to start off with a list. So instead of writing just a 0, I'm going to write 0, but in a list. So I will create a curly bracket, and I'll make a list, and I'll happily write 0 within that. Now, what this is going to do is, since you started off with a list, List.Accumulate will enforce that the output should also be a list. Right? That's one thing that you have to remember. Whatever you start with will also be the output of the List.Accumulate function. All right. So I say Power Query, hey, Power Query, you still have to work with this list, all of these numbers, nothing has changed, all pretty good. But the starting point is not going to be a vanilla 0 numeric input, but it's rather going to be this particular list, which is 0 in the list. It's still a 0, but hey, I've just kind of surrounded that in the list. And then I say that, hey, what is going to be my accumulation? My accumulation is going to be something like this. I want of course, I want to add s and c. So I want to like add 0 plus 5 minus 3. I still want to do that s plus c. But since I also want to accumulate it, so I will write something like this. I want s, and I want to concatenate the value of the previous result, and then I want s plus c. So s plus c is giving me an answer, but then I also want to concatenate the output of the previous result. So I want to s and then concatenate s plus c. So I will just write, take s is nothing but the result of the previous iteration. I want to take s and I want to concatenate s plus c. Now this formula at the moment is not going to work. So if I just happen to copy this particular formula and go back in Power Query, and in Power Query, if I just duplicate my query, right click, and I'll say duplicate, and I delete a couple of steps, I still have a list. I make a new step, and I delete everything, and I paste my formula. And if I just replace the parts of the formula, and I say this is going to be my column 1, and my seed is going to be a list, which is right, and I just delete these characters that have come off Excel, and S and C, all good, all good. Now that's my List.Accumulate function. Let me just kind of clean that up a bit. And you can see that this actually gives me an error. Now, why? Why do you have an error? Let's just go fix the error. To be able to fix the error, we need to understand a concept that in Power Query, different types of values do not become friends. That's the easiest statement that I can think of right now on the camera. Different type of values do not become friends. What do I mean by that? I mean to say that if you are making a new query, I'll say a blank query. And if I'm saying that, hey, just do a zero, a zero plus one. Zero is a number, one is a number, they'll be friends, and the calculation is going to be carried out, and you will get the answer as one. There was a space at the start, and the answer is going to be fun. So same thing, like this is a number, and they're going to be friends, all good and good. Now, if I happen to say 0 in a list plus 1, they're not friends, because now you have changed the behavior of 0, and 0 is no more a 0. It's like a 0 in a list. And if you add 1 to that, this is going to kind of not take very happily. So it says that, hey, on the left-hand side, we have a list. On the left-hand side, we have a list. On the right-hand side, we have a number. No, thank you. Sorry, we cannot be friends, and I cannot perform the addition. So remember, in Power Query, different types of values cannot be friends with one another. So what I have to do is I have to be able to do something like this. For this to work, I'll have to do something like, so I'll have to write an and symbol in between, make this also in a list. Now 0 and 1 have become a list, and then I can say something like list.sum, and then I can add these two numbers, and that is going to give me a value, which is 1. So just remember that in Power Query, different type of values do not get along well, and they're not friends. That's one lesson that we're going to use heavily to be able to solve the problem that we are stuck in at the moment. All right. With that lesson out of the way, let's go back to Excel and start cracking our problem. So I'll say home, close and load to, and I'll say that please do not load the data, and I'm good with that. All right. Now, again, list.accumulate. Here is my list. Good, no problem. My starting point is not a 0 anymore. It's not a vanilla 0. It's still a 0, but it's not a vanilla 0. I'm starting off with a 0, but that 0 is packed in a list. So this is a list. And then in this accumulator function, which is s plus s concatenated with s plus c, let's just first tackle the s plus c. So what are you trying to say here? So I'm trying to say that my s plus c is going to be something like this. So I want to take my C, which is my 5, the current value in the iteration, and I want to do plus with a list item. And this is obviously not going to work because you're trying to add 5 to a 0 in a list. So this is not going to work. This is obviously going to give you an error. It gives you an error in Excel also, but I'm just letting you know that it's going to give you an error in Power Query as well. So what do I do for this part of the formula to work? Let's just work on this part first. What do I do for this formula to work? What I'm going to do is, since I have declared the value in a list, so I'm going to tell Power Query, hey, Power Query, momentarily, please extract the last value. So 0 happens to be the last and the first value in the list. But I'm going to say that, hey, please pick up the last value in the list and add 5 to that. So if I happen to write something like list.last, and I say I pick up this particular list, which is nothing but 0. That's my list. So there is only one value in the list. That's the first value, and that is also the last value. So list.last is going to give you 0 without the list. It's just going to give you the number 0. And once you get the number 0, then you can add 5 to it, which is your numeric calculation. So plus 5, this particular calculation is just going to work fine. So whatever list is being created, which is my starting point, I just want to pick up the last value of the list and then add 5. Now this is part solution of the problem. So I can just write something like list.last here. So s happens to be the value of the previous step. So this is my previous iteration. And I will say, hey, pick up the last value of the list and then add the C. All right. Now, once I do this, let me just kind of go ahead and put that right here. Once I do this, I will then drag the value down. Now, right now, if you think about the output, what is the output that I want to generate? So if I just unhide all of the values that I have hidden here, so I'll just maybe color them as black. The output, the final output of this particular query is going to be a list, like a list. Right now, this shows horizontal, but this is going to be vertical. So the output that I would want to have finally is 0 and 5 and 2 and 10 and 7 and 8 and 4. That's the output that I want to see. Right now, the list.last plus C, what this is doing is this is going to give you a particular formula is going to give you 5 or 4 or whatever the output of that formula is. Now you're saying that I want to concatenate, like I want to take 5 and I want to concatenate with S. So that's my concatenation symbol, and I want to concatenate with S. And what is S? S is nothing but the result of the previous iteration. So here, the S is going to be this. Once you move to the next stage, the S is going to be, obviously, once the values are concatenated. So S is going to be 0 concatenated with 5 concatenated. That's going to be your S. And then this is going to be your S. And then this is going to be your S, whatever. So 0 and then the addition and stuff like that. And that's going to be your S. Now, the problem is that S is a list. And list.last plus C is producing a number. So again, they're not friends. List cannot be friends with numbers. So what do I do? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the behavior. And I'm going to say that, hey, list.last, which is this particular output, will also be a list. So I just maybe write a curly bracket at the start and curly bracket in the end. Now they are friends. Now I'm saying that S is a list. I understand that. So I just extract the last item of the list, add C to that, and again convert it back into a list by adding the curly bracket. Now, because I've mended people and I've just made friends, everybody here and there, with all of these adjustments to make friends with one another, Control C on that formula, I go back to my Power Query and I now start to write this function inside of my query. And let's just see if that gives me the right answer or not. So list.accumulate, I want to work with this list, which is nothing but the previous step. Good. 0 happens to be my first part of the list, which is nothing but 0 in a list. Then S and C, okay. Now, the S plus C is going to be in a list. That's one part. And then I have to use list.last here, list.last. And that's what we discussed. Start the bracket and then close it. Oops, sorry. Start the bracket, close the bracket. And I hope this should give you the answer that you're looking for. Now, this is nothing but the accumulation that was happening in every single step that you weren't able to see in this particular example. So if you take a look at this example, the only value that we saw was 4, which was nothing but the output of the last iteration, and that's the value 4. Right now, this is calculating every single iteration, but we are also combining S along with that. I hope I have been able to make it absolutely clear that what is the reason of creating this mess of brackets around this, because we want to make friends jive with other friends. So S was a list. This entire thing was producing a number, but we wanted it in a list. So that list can be concatenated with another list. Therefore, we added a curly bracket, and that starts to work. All right. Any questions so far before I move to the real example? So far, we have just been kind of messing around with list.accumulate, trying to understand how this works. But the real example comes next. But before that, are there any questions that I can answer in conceptual wise, like logic wise?
Well, there is no question. Only one question I found here, which is I can see the use for this list to visualize inventory level over time. Is there any other use cases for this formula?
Yeah, sure. So the use case is coming up next. This was a terrible example to start with. I totally understand. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
But this afternoon, this is what I could think of.
Sorry, Chandy, I'm not sure it's the quality of your network, but your video and voice are not matched exactly, and I can see your video breaking up sometimes. There is a lag there. Not sure if there is a solution there. You can something consuming the bandwidth. You can cut it off, or
nothing. Actually, the internet is working fine. If you want, I can trigger down the resolution of my camera, if that helps.
Maybe that helps, yeah. Maybe. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah,
all right, now, people, the moment of the truth. Where the hell in our real lives do we use List.Accumulate? Are we ever going to talk about a practical application of List.Accumulate or not? Right? That's the question. That's what you're here for. The concept, the theory is all good, but where the hell are we going to use List.Accumulate? Okay. Now, let's just go take a look at a practical example. And I'm going to do some work manually just to help you conceptualize List.Accumulate in a practical setting, and then we will go solve that problem. So I'm going to go to the home tab, close and load this query, and we are back right here. Now, here is a practical example. I've got a 2-columnar table, very, very simple. These are roles in a company. So we have a business analyst, a junior analyst, a senior analyst, a manager, and an accounts person. Simple. And we are supposed to hire people. And we asked for resumes. And these are the number of resumes that you got. So for business analyst, you got 134 resumes, junior analyst, 196, so on and so forth, and 143 for the accounts person. Now, when you are hiring people, people have to obviously go through a series of selection rounds, which we call it as an interview process or a funnel process. And eventually, from these 134 people, you will eventually be hiring lesser number of people. So some people are going to get out at a hiring stage, at the negotiation stage, and things like that. So on the right here, we have these stages. So think of this something like this. So let me just copy these stages right here. And let me just create more space. Actually, I can move this down. So Control X on that, Control V on that. I can take these, Control C on that, and I'm just going to maybe copy and paste them here. I don't really want to and transpose the data. All right. So for the 134 resumes that I have received, I'm going to make calls to those people, and some people may answer, some people may not answer. Then from the people that I have made calls to, some people are going to be shortlisted. And then from here, some people are going to be appearing for technical interview. Some people are going to be offered the job. And then finally, I will hire a bunch of people. And what I want to do is I want to fill the numbers in this matrix. Now, the only way that I can fill the numbers in the matrix is that I would get to know that at every single stage, what is the ratio of the people that fall out. And hypothetically speaking, for a easy sense of the data, let's just consider that number to be 75%. So if I'm making calls, I will only be able to make calls to only 75% of the people. So that's point. So if I got 134, I'll be able to make calls of 200 people only. Then from the 100, I'll again be able to only shortlist 75% of the people, so on and so forth. And this is going to be what my data is going to look like. So that I will eventually be able to hire 31 people. And this is going to be the same for every single position which is out there. Now, obviously, I would want to create this entire table. So the first 2 columns and all of these columns, I want to create in Power Query. And these columns should be dynamic. Right now, these columns are manually created in Excel, but these columns should be dynamic. When I say dynamic, what I mean to say is that as I change the rounds here, if I add the rounds, delete the rounds, change the name of the rounds, this table, this entire table, which I'm planning to create through Power Query, should expand or contract. That's my idea. It's a very practical example. Anybody who works with funnels, sales funnels, hiring funnels, this is a great example to kind of work with. And we're going to do this using, obviously, List.Accumulate. So with the setting in mind, what is it that we're trying to achieve? Let's just kind of go back to Power Query and start creating List.Accumulate. So I'm going to load both of these tables. So the first table and the second table, both of these tables, I will load it in Power Query. So the first table goes inside a Power Query. Oops, I didn't load it actually. Let me just do it again. The first table goes inside a Power Query. That's my first table. And let's just call this table as your interviews. And the second table, I will duplicate that and I will just change the reference of that. Let's just see what the reference is. That's called table number 4. So that's the name. So I'll just change that, call that table number 4, and good to go. All right. So this is my, let's say, rounds table. All right. So now this is nothing but the names of the columns that I want to create. So I want to create a calls column in this table, interviews table. I want to create a shortlisted column in the interviews table. I want to create a technical round column in this table, so on and so forth. So let me just go ahead and start to do some manual work. The manual work is going to give me an understanding of how do I use the List.Accumulate function, and is the behavior even syncing with the function's properties or not. So I'm going to go ahead and add a column just as the way that I do it, add column in Power Query. I'm going to call this column as calls because that's what I want to create in an automated way. So right now I'm writing a manual formula, and the calls formula is going to be take this number, which is 134. So I will just click right here, multiply that with 0.75. And that is what I would want to do. Click on OK, and that's my number of calls. Let me just create one more. So add columns, custom column, and I'm going to create, let's say, I don't know what was the next, shortlisted. So shortlisted is my next column, and the shortlisted is going to be nothing but calls multiplied by 75%. So I'm just going to say, hey, I have a calls column, multiply that with 0.75, and that is what my output is going to be. Click on OK, and that is what my output is. And similarly, I will create as many number of columns that I have, and those are the number of steps that I've created. Now, with these steps right here, Power Query cannot just add automatically an added custom step and name it and all of that. It's not possible. So what I want to do is I want to write List.Accumulate function. But before I do that, let's just understand the behavior. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the notepad and start to write List.Accumulate. And let's see that in List.Accumulate, does this behavior even fit right well or not? So if you remember, List.Accumulate, the first part is nothing but your list. The second part is nothing but your starting point. And then you have your S and C, which are the two mandatory variables, state and the current. State is the output of the previous iteration. Current is the current value in the iteration. And then I will have to write some function here, right? All right. With this in mind, let's just go take a look. So if you now take a look at the first step, let me just remove the change type. I don't need it. So if you take a look at the added custom step, in the added custom step, you started working with the source table. The source table was nothing but the starting point. That this is the table on which you have to start adding the first column, right? So this is nothing but your starting point where you started to add the columns. That's one. Then how do you add the column? So you say that in this table, whatever is the last column, please take that column and multiply with 75%. And the name of the new column is going to come from this particular list rounds. That's the name of the new column. Then you go to the next step, which is the next step right here. And you say that now I want to work with the result of the previous step. So the result of the previous step was added custom. This was the result of the previous column added. That means in the previous step, we have a 3-columnar table. This 3-columnar table is right there in the added custom. So you want to add a column on top of the previous step. This is exactly what the List.Accumulate function does. It works on the result of every single previous step. So on every single previous step, I want to add a new column, and the name of the new column is going to obviously come from this rounds table. So if you just take a look, the second value is nothing but shortlisted. Shortlists or shortlisted, doesn't matter. So shortlisted is going to be nothing but your value right here. And then you're going to say that I want to pick up in this table, I want to pick up the rightmost column and multiply again 0.75 on that. This is exactly the behavior of List.Accumulate. So what List.Accumulate function will do is List.Accumulate function will take a look at all of these values. It will keep creating columns on the last step of the table and just multiply the last column with 75%. But how will all of that happen? Let's just start to feed the inputs right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start to at least try to frame the logic in List.Accumulate. Even if I'm not able to write the full logic in the notepad, I still be able to kind of get some value out of it. So List.Accumulate. The first part, what list are you trying to work with? The list that I'm trying to work with is this list. So if I List.Accumulate, first part is always going to be a list. So the list that I'm trying to work with is this list. Right now, this is a table. I don't really want to work with a table. I will have to convert this 1-columnar table into a list. But hey, here is the list, which is called shortlist, technical, offered, and hired. This is the list that I want to work with. Let's just go back. So that's my list. That's my list. Then it says, hey, what's your starting point? Now, in this case, like I said, whatever you mention in the starting point is also going to be the output of List.Accumulate. So if I just go back to the interviews table, my starting point is this 2-columnar table. So I would like to start to add more columns to this 2-columnar table. And because my starting point is going to be a table, which is nothing but source, the output of the list.accumulate function will also be a table with not 2 columns, but the number of columns that we specify. So that's my starting point. Then we come to the S and C. So S and C. What is S? When you are starting off your first iteration, the source obviously will become your S. And the C is going to be every single item in this particular list. So the first item was calls, then we have shortlist, then we have technical, blah, blah, blah. So every single value is then going to be your C. Now here, this is where we will have to write a behavior, and that behavior should add these columns. Let's just maybe use the behavior of these very columns only. So I'm just going to maybe copy this particular formula, Control C, and I'm going to come back to my text, and I'm just going to start to write it here. So I'm going to say that as a behavior, what I want is I want to add columns. So I want to add columns to the previous step. And like I said, in list.accumulate, S happens to be the result of the previous step. Am I live? Can you still hear me? I just got a blackout for a bit.
Yeah. We can hear you now.
Hey, Wahid, all good?
Yeah. All good. Go ahead, man. Just for a few seconds, we lost you.
Okay. All right. Are we good? Shall I proceed?
Yeah. Good.
Sorry.
That's fine, man.
Sorry about that. So I was saying that in the table.add columns, I want to add a column on the previous step or the previous table. So this was added on the source. Then this was added on added custom, and the next is going to be added on the previous step, and the next one is going to be added on the previous step. Now, how do I call out a previous step in list.accumulate? I say S. S is nothing but the result of the previous iteration. Then it says, hey, what's going to be the name of your column? So the name of the column is going to come from this particular list. So in the first iteration, my first column is going to be called as calls. The second column is going to be called as shortlist. And every single time it goes through that iteration, this value is going to be stored in a variable called C. We know that. So I can say that calls, which is right now hard-coded, is going to be stored in a variable called C. Now the question comes, from the table that is being created, how do I pick up the last column and multiply that with 75%? Right now, we're not bothered about that. Right now, I just want to write some pseudo value. So I don't really want to write resume into 75%. I just want to write any random number. That means create the columns at least and write 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Like, I just want to make it easier and more digesting for you to do it. So with this setup in mind, let's just go write the formula. So I'm going to go back to my interviews table, get rid of this, and start to write list.accumulate. So I'll say list.accumulate. Start with this table. Sorry, my bad. So list.accumulate. Start with this particular table. Right now, this is a table that this should be a list. So let me just go back here, right click, and I'll say drill down, and this is going to be a list. So I'm going to say start with my rounds list. That's my list. Then it says, hey, what's your starting point? So my starting point is nothing but my source table, which is my previous step. That's where you start to add the columns. Then I come with at the accumulator function, and I declare the 2 mandatory variables, S and C. Then I provide the rocket sign. Then I have to write the behavior. That means using S and C, what is the behavior that I want? So I will say that I want to add columns. So table.add columns. And it says, which table do you want to add the columns to? So I want to add the columns to always the previous step. So I will say S here. Then the name of the column is going to be C, because you can just pick up the value of the rounds table. And then I will say, right now, I'm not concerned about multiplying it with the last column. I just want to write 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. It doesn't matter. So I'll say each, and I'll say 1, because in every single column that gets added, I just want to write 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Let's just see that even the columns get added or not. That's the first question. And if you do that, the columns do get added. So if you take a look, role and resume were the first 2 columns. This was my starting point, and the first column got added. And then on this table, on the 3-columnar table, then another, and then on this table, another column was added on the right, so on and so forth. And this is kind of good to go. So we have all the columns right here. The columns are specified right here. That is incredible. The only piece which is missing at the moment is that, what the heck do we do with 1? Like, what do I do with 1 that should not be 1, but 134 multiplied with 0.75. Well, let me just not write 1 and let me just write the underscore. What the underscore means here in this particular context is a row. So underscore in the context of the table means a row. So it says this row, and a row in Power Query is a record. And as soon as I commit to this formula, you're going to see that all of these ones, they change to a record. So as soon as I do that, you can see that this changes to a record. So this record that I'm going to show you right now, this record will have these two values. And the next record will have these two values. And the next record will have these two values, so on and so forth. Now, from these two, just take a look. So if I just click right here on the record, you can see that BA, that's the first value. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah.
Everything good, Matt.
Yeah.
We hear you up until you click on the record and said BA. That's it.
Okay, fine. So I'll just do that. I'll just do that part again. So I'm saying that it is my record, and I can see both the values, and I want to pick up the last value of the record. That's what I would want to do. So I will convert the record into a list because it's easier to pick up the values from the list based on the positions. So I'll say, hey, the record should be converted into a list. So record.toList, start the bracket and close the bracket. And what this is going to do is this is going to convert the record into a list. Now, again, you'll still see the BA and 134, but now I can just say that from this list, pick up the last value. That's what I can say. So I can say something like list.last, and please pick up the last value of this particular list and multiply that with 0.75. That is what I was trying to do. And this gives me an error. I don't know why. Let's just take a look. So the bracket closure is wrong. So do not be a spoiler. It worked. Okay, cool. So now what we've been able to do is that we've been able to create this little table, and we can obviously round the numbers and stuff. So let me just kind of round the numbers. So the multiply. So I'll just use number dot round, and I just want to round off the numbers. All right, cool. Now this looks presentable. So I've rounded off the numbers, 0.75, no decimals, good to go. Now let's just load this data into our query, and let's just take a look at the magic from there on. So close and load the data. Don't really want this particular table. And this is my interviews data, which I can take it from here, and I can paste it next to my table right here. And that's my entire table that I have received. Now, take a look at the magic of this. If you happen to change the round, so you don't really want to call this as calls, but you want to call this as contact. Not only that, you also want to maybe increase one round in here. So you don't really want to hire a person, but you also want to have a CEO interview. That's what you want to have. So now, not only this name of the column is going to change, but because we have used List.Accumulate and the column creation is going to be automatic, you're also going to see that the number of columns also expand. And that is the beauty and one example of using List.Accumulate. What makes this function powerful is that the output of List.Accumulate can be a table, can be a list, can be a record, and things like that. And that is what makes this function powerful. The one thing that you have to keep in mind is that whatever is your starting point is going to be also the output of the function. And that's how you kind of play around with the function. The other two important parts to play around with is the S and the C. And I believe that if not more, then some understanding of List.Accumulate might have gone into you by this session. So that was the end, but I would invite questions if you have any.
That was a great presentation, Mike. Thanks a lot. Oh, my camera doesn't.
So all right. So in case you're interested to learn the M language, I have a course on M. And I'm going to send these files to Wahid, but I can also send you the link in the chat in case you're interested. I have a very comprehensive course on the M language. I'll be more than happy to have you in the course.
Yep. Sorry, mate. Not sure what's going on today. You have an
No.
internet issue. I have a camera issue. My camera stopped playing, acting up. I don't know what's going on, but I just changed my camera up. So there are some questions in the chat. Just one of them
Sure.
was about this one. Let me just change this to this one. Rin asked how if I change S to C. So C and then bracket C and least last is plus C.
So what you're doing is that you're concatenating the current value, not the result of the previous value. So this is going to work. This is a legit output. But in this thing, what you're doing is you're just concatenating the current value and you're not concatenating the last value. The results will change, but you will see the concatenation of the current value happening and not the previous value happening. That's the only change.
Yeah. Okay. And there are some general questions about how we can learn Power Query. I know you have a great courses about the Power Query. I shared
Yeah.
all of the links to your website, to your YouTube, and your LinkedIn in the chat, and people can find it there. And even if search your name, they can find your profile, your website, and then use those courses. Those courses are really, really great. Highly recommend to
Yeah.
start from those courses. But for other people, if they want to start from and doing the basic start and from the basic, and they want to start as a self-study, what do you recommend to start? How they to start as a self-study for learning Power Query?
Sure. So I'll say a few things here, and I'll be saying it for the first time ever on the internet that my book is going to come out on M very, very soon.
Ooh, that's a great
And
news, mate. Can't wait.
so you can obviously learn through that. Recently, my friend Rick DeGroot and Melissa DeCorte released a book. That's a great big book to have. My book is going to be much shorter. It's going to be applications of M more than teaching you M. So I want to teach you how to use M to solve your problems more than just like conceptual level understanding and things like that. I have concepts, but then I have a lot of applications and examples in the book. So that's one. So you can buy my book when it's out, or you can buy Rick's book right away. That book is out. That's a great book. I have it. Also, what you can do is you can just take a look at the playlists that I have on Power Query. So I have like, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 videos in Power Query. That's going to be a good place to. The only problem with the playlist is that if today morning I decide to make a video on List.Accumulate, I will make that. And tomorrow morning, if I decide to make a video on a lesser complicated topic, I will make that. So there's not order in which the complexity of the videos increase. You just have to manage that. If you can manage that, there are a ton of free resources out there that can help you learn Power Query.
That's great, mate. The biggest news is you I can't wait to have your book and read and learn from your book. That's a great one. Actually, the Rick, Greg, and Melissa book is one of the great book in Power Query. Yeah, in the Power Query, I was a technical reviewer for that book, so I
Oh,
really
is it? Okay.
love. So yeah, so that's a great book actually. So, but I'm pretty sure your book will be one of the gem. Yeah.
Thank you.
So there are a few questions here. One of them I just put it to added to the page. So
Yeah,
Nancy,
so List.Accumulate is linear. I don't think it's recursive. It cannot reference itself. Uh, the the only way you can build recursiveness in Power Query is using the @ symbol in Power Query. Even the list.generate function is linear. However, the list.generate function has the ability to stop when a condition is met, but both of these functions are linear functions. That means they list.generate function will stop if a condition is met. List.accumulate function will keep on going till the list is finished. So yeah, that's the answer.
no, and this is the last question actually.
Can List.Accumulate function be used for finding aux table using partial match? Lid Berlin D that contains the text using lid. I want to assign the category value store. If the match is there in multiple columns, so imagine a scenario like this. You have multiple text columns, but you don't know how many text columns. So your first step is identifying the names of the columns which have text values. You generate a list through that, and then you write list.accumulate. That means if you find a partial match, then you replace it with something else. That can be done using list.accumulate. But if you just want to do a partial match search, I think text contains can just work in a single column. But I believe I will use list.accumulate where I want to repeat that action through multiple series of columns in a table. That's where list.accumulate can do.
Perfect. And that was the last questions. Thank you so much, Andy. I learned a lot from you, and you made that very complicated, function easy for me and for the people. I'm pretty sure if someone watch this video can learn how to use this accumulate the function, and that's a really useful function. Thank you, everyone, and catch you later.
Thank you.